All right, I am recording now. Hello, and welcome back to me reading to you. All right, what do I need? I need something. Let's see if this works. That might just do the trick. Maybe. It's okay. Let's see. Okay, let's see what I have. Okay. Excuse me. Sorry. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm just getting all set up. Whole setup. All right. Last stuff we left off at now in chapter 8. Sorry. Alrighty. Alright. So we last left off where they were at the lagoon, and they were forgetting why they were even there. And they had a balloon ready for them to take off. And they were just going to stay there a couple more days, and then the people that are hunting them are close. They are not too far behind. All right. Chapter 8. The Wild Hunt. May stared at the invitation line on the hammock with breathless anticipation. Come to a dress-up shindig tonight. May and Somber Kitty had had a few small affairs in May's room back home, and May had shared in cupcake parties at school, though usually the cupcakes ran out and May only got to scrape the icing off the box. But she had never been to a shindig. That afternoon, she had created a warrior costume out of silver beads, a black sheet she had borrowed from Zero, the flowers from the plant in her room, and of course, her death shroud. Now she was letting Bee paint her face in blue and green streaks with ink squeezed from the ghost weeds. Bee had already pulled her hair back in a tight braided ponytail and stuck some feathers into the hairband. Just one more, Bee said, grinning. There. She turned. May. She turned May toward the mirror so she could see herself. The braid made her look like she had hardly any hair. The lines of the war paint were crooked and made her look bluish and quite dead, and the feathers tilted at weird floppy angles. Do you like it? Bee clasped. Bee asked, clasping her hands together unsurely. Oh, yes. May's heart sank, though. Bee had made her look like a boy. Bee beamed. Her own blonde hair was fashioned into a tender flounce that complemented the blue of her eyes and the pink of her gentle cheeks. May had been hoping for something more like that. How do I look? Bee asked. May grinned. Bee always looked beautiful. I think Zero will think you look very pretty. Beatrice turned pink, sniffed, then gave her hair a messy toss. I certainly don't care. But as they walked out of the room, May noticed she patted her curls again to make them neat. Down in the vale, echoes of cracking coconuts, rang against the cliffs. Bongos and guitars came levitating down into the canyon in the arms of their levitating owners, and a bonfire was lit by the lake. And a bonfire was lit by the lake, where everyone was gathered. Zero, wearing his usual grin and a T-shirt that read "Death is good," said that it was tradition on festival nights for everyone to get up and recount how they died. The stories of daring death stretched and stitched themselves through the night. One woman had fallen down a crevice in the Andes and had never emerged. Another had been taming lions in Africa and turned her back on them for a moment, dazzled by an unfortunately timed Serengeti sunset. One salty old veteran had been traversing Papua New Guinea on foot when he'd waded into a nest of hungry leeches. While these stories were told, the bongo drummers drummed. Some spirits had tales of adventures in the afterlife as well. Several had met up with poltergeists. One had slept in a seemingly deserted grotto, only to wake up to find he had been hot. One had slept in a seemingly deserted grotto, only to find he had been hogtied by goblins and was being dragged to the Dead Sea as a souvenir. Fortunately, it was Fashion Week in Glosso, the avant-garde garment district of Ether, and the goblins had come across the sale. They had forgotten about him long enough for him to chew off his ropes. At the end of the story, Pumpkin shot up. May is supposed to save the Ever After from certain doom. Everyone went silent for a moment. Pumpkin looked about uncertainly, the color rising on his pale, wrinkled cheeks. Somebody said, "Cool." A couple of spirits stood up and drifted away. Another began to strum on a guitar. That reminds me, my cousin got into a fist fight with a zombie at the Pit of Despair. And so the spirits continued with their stories. Pumpkin looked rather deflated until a round of singing started up. Apparently, the song was very popular in the afterlife because even Fabio knew the words. The words. They both joined in. Okay, I'm gonna start singing. In our island paradise, that volcano sure looked nice. You fell in and so did I. I screamed once, but you screamed twice. The lava was hotter than any spice in our island paradise. Ah, that was cool. That was a good little rhyme. It wasn't so much singing, but a little tune rhyme. Um, uh, Pumpkin's singing rang out louder than the others, but nobody minded because of his beautiful singing voice. Bee sang along, gazing at the others. May watched silently. Why don't you sing? Bee eventually asked her, happy in the moment. Oh, I can't sing, May said, shaking her head. That wasn't exactly true. She sang along with the sound of music sometimes, but only when she was alone. And she sang very badly. Though, now that she thought of it, she probably hadn't been alone at all. She had only recently discovered Pumpkin had been haunting her house for years. Oh, go on. Anyone can sing, Beatrice encouraged her gently. May smiled, but even when the chorus came around a second and third time, she kept smiling, mouth closed. A few spirits got up to dance. Zero spun by a few times, dancing in a jokey, kicky, dashing kind of way. On the third pass, he yanked Beatrice up in one deft motion, spinning her under his arm. The two floated lopsidedly off into the crowd. Beatrice shooting a please help me face at May, nevertheless, glided gracefully as a feather. A smile stuck across her face from one ear to the other, which she had turned to the ground to hide. May half wanted to be asked to dance and half didn't. She tapped her feet. When the boy with the alligator scars looked at her across the grass and winked, May looked away quickly and frowned, shy. Somebody who loved to dance more than anything except for May leaped up and did some interpretive ballet. Pumpkin and May laughed and clapped. A limbo contest was held and Somber Kitty won, but then something seemed to turn him serious. He sniffed the air solemnly and retired to May's side, looking worried. The bonfire flickered on the water. May hugged her knees tighter, watching through her big eyes. What is it, Kitty? Kitty stared at her and whispered, Meow. May looked back at the dancers, then back at him. Is something wrong? Suddenly, the spirits on the grass went silent and still. What's everybody? Pumpkin began loudly, but Zero held his finger to his lips. Shh! He floated onto his knees and pressed his ear against the ground. A moment later, Zero sat back, nodding at the others, his eyes wide and round. He smiled from ear to ear. He stood, reached out, and grabbed May's hand. Something's coming! In a sudden burst, every spirit within hearing distance dropped what they were doing and swarmed onto the cliffs like ants, disappearing behind the falls. Before May and the others could react, they began to reappear, holding various vehicles in their hands. Rickety old scooters, unicycles, pogo sticks. Zero himself squeaked to a halt in front of the gang on a dirt bike, twisting the handles impatiently. Well, come on then! Zero yanked May by the hand and pulled her onto the back of his bike. Hold on! Kitty! May looked behind her as she was spirited away on the bike. Kitty was running after them. May clutched the back of Zero's t-shirt as he navigated the bike. Stop! Wait! Why are we going toward it? She yelled, pushing onto her tiptoes to get close to Zero's ear. Zero banked the bike sharply around a rock and they wobbled. May's, May clinging tighter to his middle. Thrills, he called back. Most of the stuff we do gets old. Since we're dead and all, since we're dead and all already. Last time we had a good shake up was when a bunch of goblins were looking for some live one. Bogus Breath Brenda or something. May's stomach gave a little lurch. But what if they... Don't worry, it'll be great. He looked over his shoulder at May and caught a glimpse of her face. Probably just some goals. They're easy to mess with, you'll see. May balked. Just some goals? But Zero, hey, don't worry. Death is good. May clenched her hands tighter as they rode down the darkness. The cyclist came to a halt at the very edge of a rolling, rocky pasture, Hold on. Punctuated on one side, far in the distance, with a tiny stone church silhouetted in the starlight, surrounded by a sprawling, abandoned cemetery. The spirits hovered on their bikes steadily, about uh the spirits hovered on their bikes steadily, about 20 in number, making a long row. Several bikes had two or more riders, their legs hanging all askew as they perched on handlebars and crowded onto seats. All eyes watched the horizon. May, too, over Zero's shoulder. And then, from somewhere in the dark ahead, came the sound of an invisible bugle, or boogle. I think it's boogle. The rustle went through the crowd. A moment later, muted and barely audible, came the thud, thud, thud of feet. It sounded like they belonged to some huge animal. Tiny shadows moved in the horizon, so small that at first May couldn't tell for sure if they were actually there. The line of cyclists bristled again, rubbing their hands together, testing their pedals, leaning onto their poker sticks, turning their handlebars just slightly. May looked at Beatrice, sitting primly side saddle on another bike, curled against her rider, and squinting into the distance with a frown. She looked at May. May looked behind her for Somber Kitty, but he was far behind them, still running, but unable to keep up. Steady, Zero whispered. Steady? As the shadows up ahead came into focus, a surprised murmur went through the crowd. In the horizon were 6 dark shapes. They rode astride 6 winged gargoyles with flames sprouting out of their nostrils. Zero gasped. Oh! Sighting the line of bikers, one of the figures let out a blood-curdling screech. Then they launched into a full gallop. May's arms and legs went numb. She watched in horror as the figures hurtled toward them, becoming more and more distinct. 6 horrible faces emerged in the darkness. They were a ghastly blue, gaunt, and lifeless, with sunken cheeks, twisted, toothless mouths, and gaping holes for eyes. Long, oily black hair hung out of their back top hats. They spurred on the gargoyles beneath them with their riding crops. Pull back! Pull back! Zero turned his bike on a dime and began to pedal furiously. All around them, the line of risk followers erupted back in the direction they'd come, skidding and swerving, hopping, falling into their pedals, and pushing ahead with all their might. Behind them, May could hear a huff huff of a gargoyle breath. Zero hit a rock, and the bike went wobbly. As they lurched, May couldn't help but fling to look over her shoulder. The riders weren't far behind. They were executing flips in the air, flying sideways, and even upside down. Faster, Zero! May screamed. Most of the other cyclists had disappeared into the trees. May searched the remaining crowd for Beatrice or Pumpkin or Fabio, but they had disappeared too. Uh, Zero veered left, then right, sending May wobbling and scratching her finger and scrabbling her fingers in the folds of his t-shirt to hang on. She felt herself start to slide backward off the seat. Z! Zero reached an arm to grab her, but it was too late. May felt the seat disappear beneath her, and suddenly she was tumbling backward through the air, landing on the grass with a hard thump. Her death shroud fell open on one side. The planes went silent. Those who were biking away came to a halt and looked over their shoulders at the living girl. Her shroud had fallen away. Zero circled in an about face. Circled in an about face on his bike to stare, his mouth dropping open. Slowly, May sat up. Behind her, across the plain, the wild hunters had stopped too. The leader's eyeless eyes stared at her, frozen, and then he shrieked and kicked his gargoyle forward. May leaped up, unsteady on her feet, her shroud now hanging limp, uh, limp from her neck. For a moment, May met Zero's eyes. His, for the first time, were filled with terror. May, run! May was frozen in place, watching the riders come toward her, and then she looked frantically about. There was the church at the edge of the field there. No. There was a church at the edge of the field. There. Ran toward it in full tilt. Behind her, she could hear Zero and some of the others racing to catch up, perhaps to bait the hunters. She hit the front of the church at a sprint, not daring to look behind her. She yanked hard on the door, but it wouldn't give. Turning, she pressed against it with her back. Only 3 of the terrifying riders were racing in her direction now. The others found out behind them, blocking her escape. She dashed around the side of the church and into the cemetery. The tombstones were as crumbled and crooked as bad teeth. May chose a stone tall enough to hide her, sculpted in the shape of an angel, and crouched behind it. She curled herself into a ball and waited. Several moments went by, and May began to think that miraculously the riders had gone past the church. She peered out from her hiding spot. She could just see, through one of the church windows, a smallish sliver of purplish face. May gasped and ducked behind the stone again, bending her chin close to her knees and trying not to breathe too loud. Soon she heard the whispery rustling of the riders drifting into the cemetery. She peeked around for a second time, just barely. The 3 hunters had dismounted and were floating among the stones, the mist rising from the graves around them. One seemed to glance in her direction. As smoothly, as slickly as a snake, he drifted toward her. May curled back behind the stone and bit her bottom lip, firmly. She looked around for some kind of weapon to defend herself. There was nothing. She held her breath and sat stock still. A few seconds went by, and Then slowly a white, withered hand reached from the side of the tombstone. It touched May's cheek, and then, feeling, moved across her nose. May May opened her mouth and bit down. Screech! May didn't think. She acted. She leaped forward and wrapped her arms around the hunter's neck. Then she rubbed her knuckles against his head as hard as she could, yelling, Noogie, noogie, noogie! The hunter let out a shocked, gargling sound, trying to escape but unable to loose him, to loose himself from May's locked grasp. When he finally stumbled backward, his oily hair making him too slick to hold any longer, May moved quickly. She cocked back her left foot and kicked his rotten left shin. Screech! The hunter reeled backward, clutching his leg. Hobbled, half crouched, and completely bewildered, he turned and zipped past his two companions, who were levitating across the graveyard, utterly shocked, knocking down small tombstones in his wake, his gargoyle following on his heels. Stunned, May turned and ran the other way. And that's the end of chapter. Yeah, exactly. And that's the end of chapter 8. All right, all right, all right. All right, chapter 9. Chapter 9. All right. Chapter 9. The carnival at the edge of the world. Oh, sorry, I just got sleepy all of a sudden. Yeah. Chapter 9. The carnival at the edge of the world. This way for a great view. May came to a sudden halt, turning to look behind her and breathing hard. She had been running for as long as she could, turning this way and that, and it looked like it had worked. There was no sign of the hunters, but now she realized she was perfectly lost. May turned back to the sign that had caused her to stop. It hung from a post behind a tunnel carved into a rocky hill. It seemed suspicious, appearing as it did in the middle of nowhere. She cast another glance behind her. Surely somebody would sniff her trail and find her. Until then, she resolved to go on. She set her chin and made her way into the tunnel. A tiny imprint in the stone said, "Custom walls by Hadrian." A few feet farther, a larger sign read, "Amusements, refreshments, the rest of the universe this way." A moment later, the tunnel poured her out into starlight again. May went to take another step forward, but she gasped and leaned backward instead. There was nothing in front of her, nothing but black space and billions of stars zooming past. She reached the edge of some sort. She had reached the ledge of some sort, and only space lay beyond it. Sorry, I'm getting distracted with my nose. Yeah, the edge of the world, man. If you look back at the the map, yeah, it's the edge of the world. It is hardcore, man. It's like super hardcore. I wonder what happens. Hold on just a second. God damn it, I don't want that. Jesus fucking Christ. There we go. Yeah, but it's really hardcore. Um, she had reached a ledge of some sort. Only, only space lay beyond it. May steadied herself and crept up to the edge, leaning forward gingerly and peering over. The rocky cliff face ran in a straight wall downward, without end for as far as the eye can see. The edge of the world, May whispered, her breath quite taken away. She stared out at the vast space for several minutes, unable to move. Eventually, a bit of light drew her attention left. There, she noticed a walkway winding up the ledge and a crumbled stone wall, disintegrating in places, hugging its right side. The walkway curved around a hill and disappeared in the halo of light. Hold on, sorry. uh, There she noticed a walkway winding up the ledge and a crumbled stone wall, disintegrated in places, hugging its right side. The walkway curved around a hill and disappeared in a halo of light to the south. Letting out a deep breath, May followed it. Shortly after, Shortly, it brought her to another dazzling sight. On a wide shelf overlooking the cliff stood a cluster of tattered pink and red striped circus tents, uh, all looking like they were about to collapse. Each tent was festooned with green and purple light bulbs, twinkling and blinking and sparkling as coolly as the moon. The tents appeared to be deserted, but just in case, May adjusted her death shroud as she came to a glowing banner that arched over the walkway. And I'm gonna have to spell it out because I won't be able to I won't be able to read it. Well, I will be able to read it, but just so you get how deteriorated this thing is. That's what it spells. But you can guess what it means. Carnival at the edge of the world. Yeah, right? It's cool. All right. The the carnival was not nearly as grand as it had looked on the billboard she had seen. Instead of enormous attractions, there were these tents. No Ferris wheel soared above, only a small mechanical wheel and a clearing up ahead that spun just feet above the ground, with two seats. The Tunnel of Terror looked to be a molehill of terror. The tents looked ancient and uh, the tents looked ancient and many of the lights were either burned out or crushed. May shuffled up to one and peered in through a rent of in the filmy. Wait, let me say that again. Actually, hold on, just a moment. May shuffled up to one and peered through rent. Hold on, I need to see something real quick. Uh, oh, okay. I was like, this can't be right. It's rent. But no, rent can be a large tear in a piece of fabric. Okay, I was a little confused about that. Okay. May shuffled up to one and peered in through a rent in the filmy fabric. She gasped. She gasped. Inside was a riot with skeletal elephants wearing little yellow hats. She shuffled to the next tent, which held something called a living castle, with tiny metalwork people peeking out of its windows. Out of. Let me say that again. She shuffled to the next tent, which held something called a living castle, with tiny metalwork people peeking out of its windows, their little metal arms waving, their little metal legs attached to wire pulleys that moved them forward and backward into the shadows of the house, over and over. A third held. A third held. It's a small realm after all. A diorama of the whole of the ever after that gave a bird's eye view of the Dead Sea, the city of Ether, the hideous highlands, and more. Up closer, upon closer inspection, May realized the diorama was full was full. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Uh, upon closer inspection, May realized the diorama was full in motion. She leaned forward breathlessly to examine the tiny boats moving up and down the Styx streamway. The hundreds of translucent pin dot spirits moving around the city of Ether. A minuscule roller coaster zipping along its tracks in the Pit of Despair amusement park, and a darkly rippling Dead Sea. Nibbling a pinky nail, May searched the southern end of the diorama for a small town of Belmonte, but only the catacomb cliffs had been reproduced. Sorry, I'm just gonna stop for just a second. Man, I need to get like a massage or something. All right. I should not put my feet on another feet because I get really comfortable in that position, and then when I want to move my feet, it's like it hurts because it's been in that position, in a weird position, but it felt good until you move it, and oh god, it's just, and my neck hurts. I need to get like a massage, like an actual massage. Because the back of my neck kind of hurts. All right. Anyway. Get it, girl. I know. I do deserve it, don't I? I do. I do deserve it. Okay. Um. May searched. Nibbling a pinky finger. Finger. Oh my god. Um. Hold on. I'm gonna readjust myself because I need to do that. Okay. Nibbling a pinky nail, May searched the southern end of the diorama for the small town of Belmonte, but only the catacomb cliffs had been reproduced, and May touched them gently, thinking of Lucius. She woke along the circus. She wove along the circus attractions, soon finding herself a few yards away from a squat building fronted by a sprawling, yawning porch overhung with a blinking neon sign on stilts that read, "Eat at the Eternal Restaurant." The porch butted right up against the cliff's edge and was dotted with several viewfinders, tall, rusted metal posts with binoculars at the top, like May had seen in postcards of the Grand Canyon. She climbed porch the rickety porch stairs and inspected one more closely. The tiny engraving read, "Spy on stars billions of light years away. Feel like you're there." Finally, goddamn. Okay. May smoothed the back of her bangs and gazed into the viewfinder. It was like swimming in the ocean and looking underwater with a pair of goggles. Suddenly, the stars surrounding the Ever After came into focus. Beta 7 million. Beta 789455-3 is for lovers. If you lived on Betelgeuse, you'd be home by now. May pulled back and squinted at the sky. Nothing but tiny pinpoints. She looked back through the viewfinder and tilted it upward. Closer, just above her head, a long glowing banner of light being cast skyward from the Ever After read, "Bored of the entire universe? Try the afterlife." Wow. May had no idea the universe was full of so many ads. She swept the sky, hoping to get a glimpse of her, but she guessed it was too far away to see. May was too deeply ugh. May was too deeply lost in thought to notice the figure hovering nearby until it floated close enough to touch her. Rumor had it that Commander Berserko had been let out of her pen. That very morning, the wild hunters had burst into South Place, crying for their mommies, and had galloped straight into the and had straight. Ugh! God damn it! Rumor had it that Commander Berserko had been let out of her pen. That very morning, the wild hunters had burst into South Place, crying for their mommies, and had galloped straight for the bogey's bedroom. Apparently, in their long and sordid careers tracking and trapping prey, they had never come across a prize that fought back, especially with noogies. Now the bogey, it was whispered, had been forced to resort to the unthinkable, and all the dark spirits of the South closed. God fucking damn it, I cannot fucking read for whatever fucking thing. Jesus. Now the bogey, it was whispered, had been forced to resort to the unthinkable, and all the dark spirits of South Place closed their casket doors a little tighter, looked over their slimy shoulders a little more often, and slept a little less soundly, though they still continued to snore. They were sure, every time they turned a corner on the Screamer Flats, or walked along the banks of the Corkscrew River, or wound their way toward their graves at midnight to haunt Earth, that Commander Berserko would be there, ready to do, well, the thing that Commander Berserko did best. And though they had good reason to be fearful, they need not have gone through all the trouble, for by the first evening of her release, Commander Berserko was not in South Place at all, but at a teleporter in an abandoned town of Clevelville, number 135. The commander stepped out of the booth and took a good look around. Her fluffy black fur stood high around her pudgy finger. Oh my god. What is wrong with me today? Her fluffy black fur stood high around her pudgy figure, lush and luminous, and voluminous. Her long black tail bobbed coquettishly, like a pom-pom. Her fur was more than 4 inches long and standing up in all directions, making her look like a round black marshmallow, or a fluffy black butterball turkey on Thanksgiving Day. A tiny, delicate pink bow was positioned jauntily by one black ear. Her whiskers were long and wistful, her eyes wide, green and irresistible. She wore a glittering collar of black diamonds. She lifted her head to sniff the air, revealing the glossy white teeth poking out of her jowls, and said one simple word, meow. With the scent of the living cat fresh on her nose, Commander Berserko headed north. Hold on, I just need to read a little farther. And that is the end of chapter 9. Alright. Jesus, I do not know what is wrong with me today. I just can. It's like I cannot read for whatever reason. But don't worry, I will keep on reading because that's what I do best. Though, I'm just thinking after I'm done and you do your thing and I do my thing, because I'm going to watch anime. I'm just thinking about I have some chocolates ready that I'm going to eat. I have some chips I'm going to eat. I just want to eat them right now, man. I'm just oh hell yeah. Yeah, I want to get it, but I'm reading to you. So I cannot. I have a duty. A duty to a duty. Anyway, let's get back to the main scheduled program. Duty. Yeah, let me get to my duty. Alright, Chapter 10 The Stranger. Are you looking for something? May jolted and stepped backward, tightening her death shroud. Oh! The spirit wore a dark brimmed white. The spirit wore a dark, wide-brimmed hat, its shadow hiding his eyes and cheeks and revealing only a rough, scarred chin and a pair of curled, dry lips. The lips rose to a sneer. Didn't mean to startle you, he said. May rocked back, slightly on her heels. She breathed his breath smelled sour. That's okay, she gulped, blinking at him, her throat dry. He nodded toward the viewfinder. I see you were taking in the view. Or, let me say that again. I see you were taking in the view. May swallowed. Uh-huh, yeah. Yes, it's, pretty. He let out a low, gravely laugh. He drifted past her and cast a desultory glance beyond the cliff. I don't find it all that pretty myself. Rather annoyingly. He raised his arms and lowered them in a graceful shrug. Vast. I think too much space for me. Or maybe it's too little of me for all that space. It makes me feel small, like a speck. She turned toward her and his lip curled again. Do you ever feel like a speck, boy? May swallowed. It took her a moment to realize that she was still in her warrior costume and that, indeed, she still looked like a boy. And then she tried to focus on the question. She remembered how far away the mountains of the north had seemed to her a few days ago. How the distance made her feel like a speck. Sometimes, she answered. The strange mouth turned down gently and coldly. He looked out at the stars again. Something made May very sad. We are all just stardust after all. He looked at May, then let out a cold, bitter laugh. What do you mean? May ventured. He looked at her as if she already Oh, she looked at her as if she should already know the answer. That is what all creatures, great and small, are made of. Leftover stardust. An atom exploded, and all this dust became the planets and stars and us. That's all anything amounts to. May considered this. She actually liked the idea that she might be made out of stars. She passed her hand over her death shroud thoughtfully. You never answered my question. You never answered my question. Question? Are you looking for something? Oh, no. Just... She looked at her feet. She shifted from one to the other. Sightseeing. Oh. He focused He focused on her intently. His angular features, the ones she could see, struck her for the first time as very handsome for someone old. Older than old. How unique. Most spirits stopped coming here a long time ago. You must be a singular sort of spirit. I guess you can call me that. I guess you could call me that, May warbled. I see. The stranger nodded, then smiled, seeming to approve. I see you are a loner. I like to be alone too. He laughed, and his laughter cracked with bitterness. 2 peas in a pod. May realized he was waiting for her name. She cast about, trying to think of one. It didn't occur to her to use her own. Instinct told her not to. She looked toward the circus set. She looked toward the circus tents. Dumbo. Dumbo? Dumbo? May nodded, wanting to throw herself over the cliff for how Dumbo she really was. A singular name for a singular boy, the man said. Yes, sir. I like you, he nodded. Yes, I do, and, you know, I really don't like anyone. May didn't know what to say to that. The stranger drifted right up to the cliff's edge and kicked a stone over the side, watching it drop. His shoulders sank slightly. Vast, he muttered. Again, May had a curious feeling of being sorry for and scared of him all at once. He turned back to her. Aren't you going to ask what brings me here? Make conversation? That's what spirits do. Don't you find me interesting? What brings you here? May asked obligingly. He ripped his chin scar with one grimy leathered hand. Looking for something. What? May asked, her stomach churning. A little thing, really. A girl. Oh, May said. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement drew her eyes toward one of the tents. There, crouched and peering around one of the flaps, was a pair of green kitty eyes and a hairless kitty face. May's heart did a high dive. When she returned her gaze to the stranger, he was eyeing her thoughtfully. She could see just the faintest glow of his eyes from deep beneath the shadow of his hat. She's alive. Oh? She's very small. Really? May squeaked. And she's got black hair. Oh. Oh? And she is traveling with a cat. She's traveling with a cat. May couldn't find her voice to say one more thing. The man watched her for a moment, frowning. His fingers jumped and danced at his sides, agitated. There's a house ghost with them, and maybe a couple of others. May managed to nod. I've been told she's been destroyed on the edge of the city of Ether. The stranger scanned the horizon again, and May's eyes shot to Somber Kitty. Only his nose retreated from the tent flap now, sniffing. The stranger sighed. I feel that it's not true, but then... Here, his mouth became slack, unsure. The girl is probably nothing. I tend to be somewhat paranoid. His voice, as it fell on the last word, filled May with a deep, strange sadness. She couldn't find the thoughts or the words or the voice to say anything. Her heart danced an achy, breaky jig under her ribs. There, Dumbo. He took hold of May's shoulders, his icy hands sending cold chills straight down her spine, and turned her toward the precipice, pointing to the dots of light in the distance. There's Earth. May squinted, but she couldn't tell which one he was pointing at. We are connected. We are Earth's shadow, like the negative of a photograph. But one day, Earth will be my shadow. I'll be very popular, and then I'll never be alone. Which reminds me. The stranger lowered his arm. Reminds you of what? May asked, turning back around. But the stranger was gone. May looked for several seconds, then clutched the front of her bathing suit with one hand, breathing deeply. She walked over to Somber Kitty and lifted him into her arms, feeling dread at the bottom of her soul. We've got to get north. He's the most powerful spirit, other than the spirits of the north, like the Lady of North Farm. But yes, he is powerful. I don't think they go into much detail. Maybe I think probably in this book later on they'll tell you how powerful he is. But the last book is pretty intense. But just think of him as like third grade level scary. Because this is basically what this book's audience is supposed to be. That kind of level scary. But he is spooky. What? He makes B arrive to class naked? What? He makes me arrive to class naked? That still doesn't make sense. Chandler, that still doesn't make sense. That's what I was scared of, third grade. Wow. Yes, he's that scary. He makes you want to be... Yeah, that's how scary he is. Very spooky. Okay. Back to the program. Alright. She walked over to Somber Kitty. Wait, no. We've got to get north, she whispered to Kitty, placing him on the ground and letting him point the way back to Risk Falls. That night, Ellen Bird stood on her wide front lawn and looked at the stars. Days had passed since she'd found the Briars in May's overalls, and every day it seemed as if the woods were inviting her in, whispering that the Briars somehow knew where May had gone. But something kept Ellen from venturing into the trees, something that sent shivers down her spine. Sighing, she wished upon one of the millions of stars above, one that seemed to flicker a little more dimly than the rest, like a patron star of lost causes. She wished that she would find what she was looking for. Tomorrow, she promised herself she would look for it beyond the endless briars. On the rise that drooped slowly toward the moat surrounding Risk Falls, a tiny figure stalked into view. It was fluffy and round and wore a diamond collar that glinted in the starlight. Purr! Purr! Sorry if that was not as executed greatly. Command. Purr! I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to do that. Purr! Commander Berserko said, sniffing the air, her keen, slitted eyes scanning the trees for any sign of life beyond them. But it was no matter. The scent of the girl and her cat were so strong, so close, that the commander could have found them in the dark. She pawed the ground eagerly, making muffins in the dirt, sharpening her claws. This would be easy. She sauntered a few steps forward, and then began to run. And that is the end of chapter 10, and that is the end of part 1. We are beginning our journey into part 2. Whoa! Oh, baby! Part 2 is called Into the Far North. Oh, baby! I think this book has another part too. I think. Yeah, this baby has 3 parts. 3 parts. Okay. Chapter 11. Chapter 11. 2 cats. Ooh, baby. What could this mean? Oh, baby. 2 cats. 2 cats. Could it be referring to Commander Berserko? Or could it be referring to something else? Ooh, baby. Ooh, baby. Alright. Chapter 11. 2 cats. I think I'm allergic to something, Bee said tightly, pulling a hanky from her pocket and dabbing at her eyes gently. A group of travelers stood near a big... Oh my god, Commander Somber Kitty. Nice. Alright. I'm gonna... I was just readjusting myself. Yeah. I think I'm allergic to something, Bee said, tightly pulling a hanky from her pocket and dabbing her at her eyes gently. The group of travelers stood near the big straw basket of of the draft-shaped hot air balloon, saying their goodbyes. Pumpkin snuffled loudly every few seconds as tears ran out of her. Pumpkin snuffled loudly every few seconds as tears ran out of his droopy eyes. I have made a poem for goodbye. Sorry. Hold on. Okay, never mind. I have made a poem for goodbye, Fabio said, standing up straight. Everyone braced themselves. Tortellini, pizza pie, I have something in my eye. Is a teardrop big and blue? Because we sang toodaloo. On these last words, Fabio's voice became choked and he touched his fingers to his lips, bowing his head and closing his eyes. Zero grinned. Listen, Maybird, your escape from the hunters was truly spectacular. He stuck his hands in the pockets of his long shorts. And it's so cool that you're alive. What's more risky than that in the afterlife? May blushed. To her amazement, when she and Kitty had returned to Risk Falls, no one had been set upon by she had been set upon by cheering spirits.
Nice and warm in here?
Yeah, it's nice and warm in here. Sorry, that was just my mom. All right. Um. And it's so cool that you're alive. What's more risky than that in the afterlife? May blushed. To her amazement, when she and Kitty had returned to Risk Falls, she had been set up upon by cheering spirits. No one had expressed a moment's concern about what had been revealed back at the Wild Hunt. In fact, like Zero, everyone had been quite thrilled to have a living girl in their midst. And the fray, May had not told anyone about the Eternal Restaurant or the stranger she had met there. Oddly enough, she felt it was an event that belonged only to her, like a deep, dark secret. Somber Kitty sat beside her on the ground, guarding the basket like a lion and staring southeast into the highlands. Occasionally, he let out a tiny growl and wove between May's legs impatiently. May scratched the back of her knees, flattered and horribly embarrassed. Zero, you heard what I said about Bo Cleeville. Risk Falls could be next. Could be next. You'll you'll do something, won't you? Zero eyed her seriously for a moment, then gave her a punch on the shoulder and a careless grin. No worries, dude. Everything's cool here. May bit her lip and looked at Beatrice, who frowned with worry. Clearly, the inhabitants of this place, like so much of the ever after, weren't as worried as they should be. May climbed into the basket, which was laden with sleeping bags, camping supplies, and other gifts from the spirits of Risk Falls. Queen Bee, Zero said, taking Patrice's hand gently in his. Bee looked up to the sky as if she saw something very interesting above, but when Zero lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, she stared at him, her eyes wide, a smile bursting out of her flushed face. And then she wiped away a little tear as she followed the others into the balloon, trying to climb in as daintily as she could. Only Somber Kitty remained on the grass. Come on, Kitty. What are you waiting for? May coaxed. Kitty glanced over her uh, Kitty glanced at her over his shoulder, then stood up and looked into the distance again, his tail sticking straight up. Meow? Come on, little kitty, Somber Kitty said. uh, yeah, spoiler alert, Somber Kitty can talk now. Somber Kitty speaks. Glorious. Very glorious. All right. little kitty, Fabio said, leaning over and lifting him by the armpits. Kitty dangled from his hands like an old shoelace, still staring southeast. He let out a sound like May had never heard before. Something between a moan and a growl. May took him from Fabio and held him close, looking at him concerned. What is it? She followed his gaze toward the horizon beyond the moat. There was something there. She couldn't tell whether it was far away or just really small. Well, Zero said, catch you later. He untied one of the ropes holding down the balloon. With a thwop and a swing and a zwing, the basket tilted far to the left. This is no problem, Fabio said, taking hold of the burner that steered the balloon and thrusting it forward. The basket jarred even farther left, until it was almost sideways. Kitty went flying out of May's arms, landing on all fours on the grass and shaking himself off. Kitty! May managed to scoop the cat into her arms, just as the balloon started floating backward. Thwop! Zero untied the other balloon. The balloon teetered there for a moment, as if it needed to rev itself up in order to ascend. Its occupants looked around dazedly. By this time, whatever was approaching them had crossed the moat and was dashing across the vale. What is that? Beatrice said, pointing. She could see now. It was small, but actually not far away at all. It looked like, I'll be, one Risk Falls spirit exclaimed. The creature was zipping toward them, its tail flancing out behind them. May could feel Somber Kitty's heart beating against her ribs. His fur stood up all around. He let out the loudest, meanest growl May had ever heard escape his lips. Is that a pink bow? Pumpkin asked. They were still only inches above the ground, drifting slowly backward as Fabius tried to steer. The creature approached the balloon far faster than anyone could have imagined. One moment it was 100 yards away, and the next it was only a matter of feet. Somber Kitty hissed and spat wildly, his whole body shaking. Now for turning up the burner, Fabio muttered to himself, casting an indifferent glance at the creature racing toward them. The rest of the group watched in awe. Then, inexplicably, when it was still several feet away, the creature leaped. It leaped higher and farther than any leap May had ever seen, seeming to fly at the balloon. One paw poised in the air, the claws extended and directed at the leg of the giraffe. Ah! Fabio pushed something and the balloon accelerated, straight up. The creature's paw fell just short of the balloon, and it went plummeting toward the ground beneath them. A great howl of frustration issued from its throat as it landed on all fours, staring upright, its green eyes glinting. The rest of the travelers peered over the edge of the basket, befuddled, as they rose into the air. Fabio finally looked over the edge with interest. What a cute little kitty! Everyone but Somber Kitty agreed. And that's the end of chapter 11. And yeah, I did forget that Commander Berserker is an literal cat. I totally forgot that. I thought it was someone like a spirit of some sort. Somber Kitty does hate competition. He wants all that gloriousness to himself. Okay. All right, chapter 12. Chapter 12, you guys. Chapter 12. Oh, I get to show you a cute little drawing, but that's not until later. Okay. Chapter 12. The Petrified Pass. May and Kitty went tumbling across the grass, rolling lopsidedly until they ran up against a giant rock and came to a dead stop. May sat up, rubbing her head, trying to get her bearings. Summer Kitty let out a groan and tumbled out of his papoose. The hot air balloon lay deflated along the rocky ground. The basket turned sideways. Okay, honestly, I should really tell myself to stop putting my leg, to stop putting my foot on top of the other in a really weird way, like horizontally, and then when I want to move it, it like hurts because like it was in that position for a while. But it just legs crossed feels so good. Okay. Uh sorry. uh Summer Kitty let out a groan and tumbled out of his poos. The hot air balloon lay deflated along the rocky ground. The basket turned sideways. Pumpkin lay in a blubbering heap a few feet away. Beatrice was helping Captain Fabio stand up and brushing off her dress. "This is not my best landing," Fabio said, flapping his hands against his medals to dust them off. In fact, after hours of soaring above the empty highlands, the balloon had suddenly and without warning descended downward, dumping them out into an unseemly mess. Recovering themselves, everyone looked at May's direction. Pumpkin let out a scream. Bee's hands flew over her mouth. May turned to see what they were looking at, and then gulped. It wasn't a rock she had plowed into, or at least not a rock in the traditional sense. It was, in fact, a giant skull, standing at least 6 feet high, its huge tooth-addled mouth gaping in terror, and what lay beyond it was even more chilling. Summer Kitty leaped at May, his claws catching onto her shorts, and climbed back into his papoose. From the sky, the flat plains beneath them had looked as if they might stretch on forever. But the view from the ground was something quite different. Up ahead, the stars disappeared, casting a long, eerie swath of sky across the sky. Oh, sorry, I'm just getting distracted. Where was I? I was Up ahead, the stars disappeared, casting a long, eerie swath across the sky. The landscape, what they could see in the distance, was dark and dry, steeped in shadows and strange mounds. Beyond it, white, snowy mountains rose, sending a cold mountain wind up upon the travelers and making them shiver. The prairie, dead, dry, still, and cool, was littered with countless giant skeletons. They were lying as if resting, and their forms were intact, though here and there a clavicle had been tumbled out of place, or a spinal disc, or a shoulder blade. Sharing the landscape with the skeletons were a few enormous trees, some standing upright, some lying sideways, far, but all far from alive. Beatrice drifted up to the nearest tree and tapped on it gently, then rubbed her fingers together to get off the dust, and turned to look back at the others. Petrified, petrified, she said. Me too, Pumpkin moaned. Let's turn around. Bee shook her head. Not petrified as in scared, Pumpkin. Petrified means that it's turned into stone. May had read about places like this in one of her travel books. There was a petrified forest in the desert of Arizona. But I thought nothing in the ever after gets older. But I thought nothing in the ever after. But I thought nothing in the ever after gets older. These are older than old. These are older than old, Fabio said definitively, drifting in and out of one skull's gaping mouth. He didn't even have to duck. Oh, don't do that, Beatrice said, tugging his shoulder and pulling him back. This whole place gives me a terrible feeling. Meow, Summer Kitty said ominously. He jumped out of his papoose, landing gracefully, and took up a protective stance beside May, facing the mountains. As if whatever danger there was, um, hold on. He jumped out of his papoose, landing gracefully, and took up a protective stance. Beside May, facing the mountains, as if whatever the danger there was lay directly ahead of them. Which way do we go? Beatrice asked. Everyone looked at May. May scanned the landscape, rubbing her arms from the chill. Forward, I guess. Her eye lit on another stone, this one different from all the others. Hey, look at that! They all approached it slowly. And Bee read the inscription out loud. Here lie the forest giants, and here they stood. They were believed into life and then forgotten. Now only their lonely breath drifts upon the mountains and guards the way with fear. In other words, no trespassing. Signed, H. Kari Threadgood, Secretary to the Lady of North Farm. May touched the letters that sign of the signed name in wonder. H. Kari Threadgood. Sounds like their breath could be really bad, Pumpkin said. Maybe we better not trespass. May was already stepping past the tombstone. She turned to look back at the others. You don't have to go. She turned to look toward the mountains again, and then she felt Bee's arm length through hers. I adore skeleton-strewn prairies. May looked at her, then at Fabio, and Pumpkin as they floated up to join her. Are you sure? Fabio pulled his uniform straight and zipped ahead of her, thrusting one finger in the air. Now we go. May looked at May looked at Pumpkin. He straightened himself like Fabio had he straightened himself like Fabio had, thrust a finger in the air and said, "We go," and zipped along behind him. Somebody watched the others float into the petrified pass. Then he looked over his shoulder uncertainly. "Meow," he said, softly, which meant, "Doesn't anyone else realize we escaped certain doom back at Rest Falls, and that it will surely follow us?" But Pumpkin only turned around and started making kissy noises. "Come on, kitty. Don't be scared. They're just bones." Somebody gave him a look that was meant to be sobering, but it only made Pumpkin's face bunch up in a smile. "Aw, you are so cute. Come on." Sighing, his nose wiggling for a cent in the air, and his whiskers fluttering, somebody looked over his shoulder again. He supposed it was up to him alone. What could he do? But what could he do? Finally, he licked a paw and then dug out into the sand, right at the boundary of the pass. Carefully, he scraped the paw. Hold on just a sec, you guys. Ugh. All right. Finally, he licked a paw and then dug it into the sand, right at the boundary of the pass. Carefully, he scraped the paw this way and that, working quickly. It was only a few moments before he sat back and looked at his creation. He had to admit it. It wasn't bad. He had to admit it wasn't bad, considering his limited resources. Minutes later, May knelt to retie her shoe just as the entire sky flashed. An enormous face appeared across the length and breadth of the sky, its eyes obscured in a tangle of leaf-shaped clouds, its pupils trained on the tiny spot of earth where May crouched. Only somebody happened to be looking upward at the time, and he let out a howl. But by the time the others followed his gaze, there was nothing to be seen. Nothing except layers upon layers of clouds. Cautiously, carefully, they moved. For hours, May and the others made their way across the plains on a slow, steady rise that climbed closer and closer to the mountains. Pumpkin and Somber Kitty fought to be in front, but though Pumpkin had the advantage of floating, Somber Kitty managed to take the lead, shooting up ahead just as Pumpkin caught up again. They were near a dislocated. Good night. Hold on. I just need to do something fast. was wondering why the light was so on.
¿No te da miedo con ese pinche cuadro que tienes allá arriba?
No.
Comes to life and...
No.
¿No?
¿Qué pasó? ¿Qué dices, niña?
Lita told me I should take it off because demons might come and get me.
Así estaba la Génesis, Ale. Ese día.
Oh, yeah.
Bobeando nomás, ¿verdad?
Well, I was interested. I wanted to see what was going on.
Bien interested. Llegó chismosa.
Se ve, se
It's
a little better.
little better.
Yeah, not so bad.
Not so bad.
The shoes need to go where they go.
Yeah. I still need my other shoe that's outside your room.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Lávalo.
Debería ser como tu tío Fernando da los hugs.
Good night. All right. Cool. God damn. Okay. Okay, I just want to see how much I can keep on reading. I think I can finish this chapter and maybe the next chapter. Yeah, I think that's probably where I'll stop. Oh, but this chapter too. Okay, we'll see. Because I know you had to go at 10. All right. They were near the dislocated kneecap with a giant when May finally looked behind her. She could see the miles they'd crossed stretching out behind them, scattered with the hollow remains of giants and trees. But there was still a long stretch ahead. Well, how about we rest here? Pumpkin crossed his arms and looked toward the giant's massive skull uncertainly. I guess there's nowhere that isn't spooky, Beatrice said. This is good place. This is good place, Fabio offered, pulling a pair of binoculars out from his pocket and surveying the landscape. It was it was noticeably colder. It was noticeably colder than it had been when they started out, and May blew into her cupped hands and pulled poor Kitty tight. Do you think if the lady chooses, she'll just zap you home? Pumpkin asked. I don't know. But that was sort of what May had been thinking, hoping. She couldn't imagine crossing the pass twice. After they had set up camp, Bee started on a letter she planned to mail to Coffin Confidential, a talk show that specialized in making specters' dreams come true, sometimes uniting them with lost loved ones. Sorry, I just needed to crack my knees. A talk show that specialized in making specters' dreams come true, sometimes uniting them with lost loved ones. My mom's always said that when something is lost, you just have to rest your mind, May said, and then when you least expect it, it'll come back to you. Bee looked at her hurt. You think I'll never find her? May flinched, alarm fluttering in her belly. No, I do. It seemed that maybe if Bee stopped pushing so hard, just for a while. But Bee had already stood, and her nose in the air, and and her nose in the air and her little letter tucked under her arm, started off started floating off across the plain, leaving May leaving May watching her back, bewildered. What had she what had she said? At night, all sorts of things kept them up. The wind howled down upon them from the north, causing May and Somber Kitty, the only one the only two who felt the cold, to huddle together in in sleep in in their sleeping bag, their teeth rattling. The mountains, which again did not seem to be getting any closer, danced with strange lights flickering here and there like lightning bugs. Even Beatrice, sleeping at a cool distance from May, had no explanation for them. Okay. Um, when May finally slept, she dreamed that the breeze coming down from the mountains was the breath of the lady herself. Meow! Commander Berserker stood before the group of goblins and zombies she'd summoned. They had rendezvoused just a few minutes before, at a graveyard just north of the Dead Sea. In her left paw she held a marker. With her right with her right, she pointed to a collapsible blackboard, indicating a drawing she had just completed. And there's actually a drawing, and let me show it to you. It's pretty funny. I love it. I think it's pretty goofy. Kaneki, you can't get in this picture. Goddamn. There's the picture that. Oh shit, you can't see all of it. There we go. That's a better picture. Alright. The commander sniffed a pawful of catnip, then surveyed the crowd. Meow? The group the group gazed back at her blankly. Not one of the zombies or goblins present knew how to speak cat, but since their recruitment that morning, no one had had the nerve to tell this to Commander Berserko yet. So far, they had just nodded a lot as she'd pulled out maps, done drawings, even sketched the occasional portrait. So good. It is so good. I love it. I love Fabio's the most, I think. Just his little mustache. So good. Meow? The commander asked. The zombies shifted uncomfortably. A few goblins nodded. Neither group looked at each other, at the other. Unbeknownst to the commander, zombies and goblins had been sworn enemies since 1912, the year that goblins had determined that zombies had the worst outfits of any group of spirits in the realm. Mew, meow. Commander Berserker directed her gaze at an unfortunate goblin in the front, who had been examining his cuticles. The goblins started, and the goblin started and looked up in horror. Clearly aware that he was being asked a question, he pretended to be thinking really hard. He began to tremble and sweat profusely. He looked at the others helplessly. Of meow? He ventured. Meow? Commander Berserker considered, with deadly calm. Her eyes narrowed, and then something strange began to happen. Her fur stood up on end. Her body began to shake. Her green eyes widened and crossed. She floated several feet into the air like a balloon. All over her body, her fur formed itself into shiny black spikes. Her claws shot out into the air, smoke flowing madly from her ears. But most horrible of all was what happened to her tail. Meow! The tail shot out and wrapped itself around the goblin, whipping him into the air and dangling him before the others as he screeched. And then the screeching stopped. Commander Berserker began to shrink to normal size and float back toward the ground. Her spiral tail unraveled itself, revealing no sign of the goblin who had been there a moment before. And then something fell from the last curl of the tail with a clatter. A glittering black diamond. Commander Berserker scooped the diamond up with one paw and tucked it somewhere inside her collar as the dark spirits before her watched, shocked. Calmly, she returned her attention to the blackboard and pointed once again to the figure of the cat with the big ears. Meow, she said, which no one understood. Which, though no one understood, meant, leave this one to me. May awoke to a gentle tap on the cheek. Kitty was staring at her proudly, wearing something filmy and gray, and it was a little kitty coat. Behind him, Fabio sat with a tiny silver needle and a little sewing bag. Now be very still. I am still needing to finish hem. Noticing May staring at him, he sniffed. What? You thinking it is unmanly to sew? He nodded toward the white, snow-blanketed mountains in front of them. This cat, he was not made for cold mountains. He then muttered, Beatrice, teach me how. May smiled. Fabio's blue lips curled upward, his mustache curling with them. His eyes started to the mountains. Anyway, I no sleep. May thought the lights must have kept him up too. And then another thought came to her. Is this place like where you died, Captain? She asked, pulling a petrified twig from the ground and rubbing it thoughtfully between her fingers. She knew Fabio had died parachuting into the Alps. That was where he had lost all his men. Fabio stopped sewing for a moment, then nodded, his face taking on a cast as stony as the kneecap they rested against. Yes, but was not my fault, he added sharply, his nose going red. I'm sure it wasn't. May rolled her twig. Good morning, you two. Beatrice emerged from behind the kneecap. Come on, I've built a fire. May gave Bee a tentative smile, and to her relief, Bee smiled back. It looked like she had been forgiven. Somber Kitty quickly glanced at the mountains, then disappeared around the kneecap in a flash. My sentiments exactly, May whispered. On the third day, light snow began to fall. By the morning of the fourth day, light snow began to fall. By the morning of the fourth day, far up the side of one of the steepest mountains, it had whipped itself into a storm, and May couldn't see past the ends of her fingers. She, Bay, and Fabio, Bee, and Fabio. Sorry, I'm actually I'm gonna readjust myself because goddamn, my neck really hurts. Okay. Where was I? I was at. Okay. She, Bee, and Fabio had to hold hands to keep from losing one another. Somebody had let Pumpkin hold him for a while, pretending he didn't like it, and occasionally he peeked out of the collar of Pumpkin's coat where he lay hidden, protected from the storm. Pumpkin drifted along happily, a spe- uh, singing about a sepulcher in Sarasota, where his sweetheart waited for him. We have to be close to the peak, May said, pulling herself uphill by a petrified limb. She shivered under her shroud. What's that? Beatrice cupped her hand over her eyes and squinted forward. Up ahead of them, a dark hole opened up in the snow. A neon sign just at the top of it said, North Farm, this way. The travelers looked at one another. A warm glow came from the tunnel. What do you think? May Beatrice asked. I think we go, Fabio said. Clearly, this is shortcut. May gazed at the opening. It seemed odd that the petrified pass, seemingly so forbidding, should invite them in. But May was freezing, and everyone's looks urged her forward. Even Summer Kitty had poked out from Pumpkin's coat again. His ears pointed toward the tunnel with curiosity. A tiny voice inside May said to keep trudging uphill, but she wanted to ignore it. Let's just go in and see, she said unsurely. The travelers hurried into the mouth of the cave. Behind them, the neon lights flickered and then went out. The zombies and goblins came to a stop and shivered. Across them, the mountains of the petrified pass leaped from the horizon crookedly, sharp and menacing. Even Commander Berserko's fur stood on end as she paced the line that separated the pass from the highlands, sniffing at where the trail of the living girl and the living cat made a straight track toward the mountains. Now sure that the travelers had gone that way, and keenly about to scent that their trail led all the way into the mountains, she smirked, her canines poking out of her jowls. The commander motioned a paw to the goblins, who began spreading themselves along the edge of the pass and hiding wherever they could. The zombies she sent farther east to hide themselves in the traditional zombie style. All the exits from the pass would be covered. Of course, it was probably unnecessary. No one who ventured into the pass ever came back out again. The commander sank back into her haunches to watch and wait. And that is the end of chapter 12. I think I'm going to read one more because that's all of that time allows me. Unless I can get one more, but I don't think so. She's a bad kitty. She's a really bad kitty, yo. Okay. Yeah, but I think I'm only going to read one more just because I know you have to go at 10. Well, not exactly at 10, but that's when the general consensus was. So, yeah. 1, more chapter. Chapter 13. Petrified. Period. In the hush of the tunnel, May and Kitty's breath furled itself across the air, drifting farther into the depths as if inviting them forward. Dripping, thawing water echoed around them. Large lumps grew out of the ground on either side of the cave, but it was hard to tell exactly what they were. Though it was still cold, there was no wind to whip the chill into their bones. And May loosened the collar of her death shroud. She noticed it had torn in one place, and that her vivid, living body showed through the tear. "Hello?" Pumpkin called, smiling and delighted at as his own voice bounced back to him. "Pumpkin is the best," he called, cupping his long white fingers to his ears, his tufts flopping in the breeze. His echo returned again and again. "Shh!" May and Fabio hissed. Beatrice drifted up to one of the lumps and then gasped. "May, come look!" May hurried to her side. The lump wasn't just a lump, but a statue of a gull, sharp fangs protruding from under its lips, its arms held up over its eyes as if in terror. "How odd," Beatrice said. "Maybe we shouldn't be in here," May said, but already Fabio had drifted down the passage. "I have found the way," he called proudly, following a glowing blue arrow on the ground. Summer Kitty leaped out of Pumpkin's coat and onto the ground, dropping back and rubbing between Pumpkin's legs. They all reluctantly followed Fabio. More statues emerged from the darkness. Ghouls, goblins, even the occasional ghost or specter. One held a camera up to its face. "You don't think that's one of the holotographers that book talked about, do you?" Let me say that again. "You don't think that's one of the holotographers that book talked about, do you?" Beatrice whispered in May's ear. "The ones that never came back?" May shivered. All of the statues looked terrified. The number of them increased the farther they went, until they were all practically butting up against one another. "I think we should turn around," May said, swiveling to look back at Bee and Pumpkin. But the passage behind her was empty. From above, the sound of a deep breath being exhaled swept across the cave. From above, the sound of a deep breath being exhaled swept through the cave, followed by a gust of frigid air. "Pumpkin? Bee?" May whispered, then scanned the ground. "Kitty?" She shivered, and her heart thudded against her ribs. The cave seemed to have gotten about 20 degrees colder. She looked up the tunnel in the other direction, where Fabio had drifted far ahead. She looked up the tunnel in the other direction, where Fabio had drifted too far ahead to be seen. Whoosh! Again, a cold gust of air swept over May and made her shiver. "Hello?" May warbled, her pulse thrumming. "Fabio?" she called. There was no answer. Sorry, my back is really starting to hurt now. Well, not my back, my neck is like starting to hurt from just me being arched. Okay. Uh, fuck, where was I? I was at. Uh, oh, okay. May strained her ears against the silence. She peered around at the different passageways, which dug their way like hollow roots outward from the open space. An icy breath from one to the right blew her hair back, her bangs parting on either side of her forehead. May walked up to the opening, pulling her death shroud tight, her nose freezing. "Hello?" she called down to the shaft, only to hear her echo respond. She, she paused on the verge, not knowing what to do. Alright, hold on. My back is really. Well, my neck is really, like, starting to bug me. Okay. May walked up to the opening, pulling her shroud tight, her nose freezing. "Hello?" she called down to the shaft, only to hear her echo respond. She paused on the verge. She paused on the verge, not knowing what to do, and then she saw it. The figure was obscured by shadows, but still May could make out its thin, small form in the recesses of the tunnel. "Hello?" she called. "Hello?" her echo replied. May crept forward, and so did the figure. It had the gait of a jaguar, sharp, ready, poised, purposeful. "Hello?" May squeaked again. She paused, and so did the figure. There was something distinctly odd about it, distinctly familiar. The figure's hair was very dark. It had glittering eyes and a thoughtful tilt to its head. May patted up to it slowly, reaching out her hands toward her reflection in the ice. It was May, but not the May she knew. This May was older, maybe by 2 or 3 years. She no longer had knobby knees, but long, lean, gazelle-like ones. She was painted like a warrior, and clothed in a dark, sparkling shroud. A quiver of silver arrows poked above her shoulder from where it hung on her back. Her hair was long, black and lustrous, and hung down along her shoulders, wild and unkempt. "You aren't me," May whispered. This May was dazzling. She was as sparkly as the stars on her bathing suit. May touched the mirror with one fearfully extended finger. The moment she did, she felt it was a mistake. The icy cold seemed to sear its way up her finger bone, through her whole hand, then her arm. The cold shut deeper and deeper inside her, and as it did, there was an odd stiffening in her fingers. Her body began to go rigid. She tried to pull her hand away, but couldn't. May, May turned her head, and her neck cricked. She tried to step backward, but was shocked to discover that her feet would not lift from the ground. She looked down at them. They looked petrified, like stone. May looked up again, and the moment she did, her neck gave a cracking sound and went rigid as rock. She could only stare at the girl in the ice, who, unexpectedly, gave her a friendly smile and a wink. As he searched the icy cavern for May, shivering in fits despite his coat, Somebody paused and sniffed the air. Something not so far away was very wrong. He had begun to wonder what it was when he was distracted suddenly by a figure up ahead. Summer Fuzz stood straight up, and his tail twitched. May was up ahead, flat on her back, with a bouquet of roses in her hands, and more red roses strung around about her hair. Her eyes were closed. She was lying in a glass dome like a cake. Meow, Somber Kitty whispered. He gingerly stepped to the glass and tapped the area around her cheek with his paw. Meow. This reminded him distinctly of a movie he had watched with May when he had first come to live at White Moss Manor on the night of May's birthday. May had cried over the television set, and Somber Kitty, then a kitten, had watched the moving picture over her shoulder. A beautiful woman with a red ribbon in her dark hair, lying under a glass dome, surrounded by 7 little men. Bewildered, Somber Kitty hadn't understood what May was crying about, but her tears had filled him with more despair than usual. Since then, he had always associated birthday cake with sadness, and had never asked for scraps. Meow? He asked again, tapping on the glass. May did not move. Meow? Somber Kitty sniffed the glass, then sneezed. He was slightly insulted. If this was a trick, it was a pretty paltry attempt at one. This May in front of him smelled like ice. The real one smelled like a combination of peanut butter balls, dried leaves, green grass, silver sparkles, and ivory soap. Bzzz. Summer Kitty turned in the direction from which the sound had come from, just down one of the side tunnels. He cocked his head, wondering what on earth could have made it. Bzz, bzz. Summer Kitty flapped his tail madly, wondering. The sound reminded him of a bee. Curiosity made up approximately 45% of Somber Kitty's soul, and that is why, though he knew it was probably dangerous, he tramped down the tunnel to investigate. And that is the end of chapter 13. Oh, God. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.